Hello, everybody. My name is David Mickley, host of the Jargon Free Crypto Show, the show that brings you all you need to know on crypto, jargon free. Today, we are very lucky to have a special guest, the CEO and co founder of Solana, Anatoly Yakovenko. Anatoly, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Hey, great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. So, got a bunch of questions for you. Really excited to learn about your background, your work, what you're building at Solana. But let's just get started with the story of Anatoly. Can you give us a bit on the personal side, where you grew up, what you were into as a kid, and maybe a bit on the professional side, your work experience, and what led you to sort of create Solana before you created Solana?
Yeah, so I spent most of my career as an engineer. Worked on operating systems, was at Qualcomm from like 2003 to like 2015. Um, and I started there like working on optimizations and like from doing, trying to get push to talk to work within 100 milliseconds between like SF and Hyderabad. Or I was one of the early engineers on the Brew kernel, which is really the first mobile platform on those like 2 megabyte flip phones, if you remember those.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I was there until I was working on like augmented reality on a like a 64-bit ARM device that was like a supercomputer. So I kind of saw how quickly the revolution of hardware can move when there's enough demand for something, and that really kind of shaped my brain. Is that if you can build, like, I almost think of, there's a huge difference between technology and technology services, and that difference is that a technology sits on top of Moore's law. It is part of this massive wave of every 2 years, compute doubles, bandwidth doubles, everything gets better. And if it has feature overlap with something that doesn't get twice as good every time that generation, change happens, then that thing is going to get blown away. Right. Like that. And that's kind of like what shapes my brain. So 2017 rolled around. I had this eureka moment. I had two coffees and a beer, and I like had this realization that there's a way to, at 4 in the morning, I couldn't sleep, that there's a way to encode passage of time as a data structure. And at that time, I didn't know these things were called verifiable delay functions. And luckily for me, Google failed. I couldn't find anybody else working on this, right? Because I didn't know how to describe it,
Yeah.
right? And I had a couple friends in San Francisco that are like loosely related to venture capital, and I was just like, "Hey, I think crypto is interesting. It feels like crypto might be the next kind of generation of operating systems, of platforms, and I had built this stuff before." And they're like, "I'll just give you 25K. Whatever you do, just go do it." uh, Without anything. And the main advice that I got from people at that time was that the space was so nascent and so new and growing so quickly that the level of people that I would be competing with as like an experienced Qualcomm engineer was just, way, like less experienced than me. That all the stuff that I worked on is so much applicable to building out new platforms that I should just go take the plunge. And that was really good advice. Like I pulled in like a lot of really senior folks, like principal engineers, people that worked on building out the platform side of mobile on like things like Firefox OS or Brew, and like people that worked on the GPU stack all the way from the compiler down to the like the architecture for the hardware. And those folks, just kicked ass the last 4 years and built this awesome platform.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You definitely established an all-star team. And maybe before we dig into really what is Solana, how does it work, what makes it so special, can you just tell us a little bit about, I don't know, young Anatoly? Were you always
Oh,
into building
yeah.
stuff? Were you always into making stuff faster and better? Or what were you as
No,
a kid?
I was like a nerdy kid, but like grew up in the Soviet Union still when it was and I my childhood I spent most of my time like wanting to go to the beach or play in like the dirt or the forest or whatever, and just having fun. But avid reader, loved science fiction. That was really what shaped me, I think. I think probably every nerd has that like kind of like that like draw to science fiction, because you're kind of, you start to dream about like what is possible, what can like the future hold. That's maybe part of what like is really exciting about crypto, is that idea like we're building something so new that no one even knows the implications of it yet.
Yeah, totally. Totally. So I guess, were you a big Matrix fan growing up? Did you like the Matrix trilogy?
Yeah, I mean, I was like in my late teens when The Matrix came out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
same.
and but part of, like Hackers, love that movie. I was hanging out with my the coolest friends in high school. We were building like Linux boxes from scratch,
Nice.
compiling it, and getting like X Windows to run, and then figuring out how the internet works, how all this stuff works, how to connect to bulletin boards and random email servers. And that was like fun, because it felt like just it felt like kind of like counter to like Microsoft, counter to like what the traditional tech companies at the time were building. And the internet was like so raw and like unbranded and
Yeah, sure.
unprofessionalized.
Yeah, yeah, made it kind
And
of fun, like the Wild West.
right, and kind of dangerous. You couldn't send a credit card number over the internet, right, without somebody like stealing it and using it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely remember those days. So, okay, so you were always into technology, you were always into fun, you were always into being at the frontier of technology and fun. Definitely seems to embody the Solana ethos. Um, can you really explain what is Solana, sort of at the highest level, like without any technical jargon? What is Solana?
um Without any technical jargon, it is a computer that's really hard to shut down.
Nice. I like that. I like that. I like the caveat too. Really hard. Leave some room for possibility, but very hard.
Yeah.
And what makes it so special? I mean, I have a computer right here. You have a computer right there. What makes Solana such a
So
powerful?
all the data that's in your computer, the memory, everything that it's doing is copied over and over around the world as fast as you can do it. So
Okay.
that's what makes it hard to shut down, because you only need one copy to continue. So no matter what happens, right? If Yellowstone blows up, massive internet outage, whatever, like everyone says that like we got to shut down the internet, or some crazy thing, right? Whatever you can imagine, or just a bug. There's a way to basically continue it from any single valid copy. And the goal of this thing called blockchain, or permissionless open cryptocurrencies, that's a lot of jargon,
Yeah,
but
it
like,
is.
yeah, the goal of decentralization, or the jargon, like the decentralization, is to make it as hard to destroy all the copies
That's right.
as
I-
possible. That's
But,
it.
but,
It's pretty
but
simple.
no, that's a really good way to put it. But what if I like want to shut down my computer at the end of the day? Can you ever like just give Solana a break? It's working so hard all the time.
No, because we don't run it. So a bunch of people that are random people run it for whatever reasons they want to, because they like running blockchains, and each one of those people is can continue the network, right? So, or continue running this one single computer that's hard to shut down.
That's cool. That's a cool way to describe it. So a single computer, hard to shut down, supported by a very wide network, so no single point of failure. Um, and then maybe talk about what makes Solana unique. I mean, it's a really fast computer. How is it able to be
It's
so
it,
fast?
it's an extremely slow computer by computer standards, but it's a
Okay.
fast by blockchain standards.
Oh, that's good. That's good clarification. So maybe I just want my single computer and that's it, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
you cannot run video over Solana. You cannot play you cannot play like Tetris, right? Like,
I was gonna watch The Matrix on Solana tonight.
right.
Now I'm bummed.
Yeah, so it is like a very expensive computer that is slow by computer standards. I think of it as almost like the Atari 2600. That thing could do like a million things per second, we're at like best case scenario 50,000 things per second. The things are more complicated, but like you can think of it in that terms, right? Like user actions, right? Like how many interesting things that a person may need to do if it's a really really complicated thing by those 80 1980 standards, we can only do about 50,000 of them, and that's basically it. And our goal and but what makes it unique is that all the other blockchains can do like
Wow.
five of those things per second, and we're like, let's go 1,000, 10,000 times better. Let's go to 50,000, and then we're gonna work really hard to get to 500,000. Work really, really, really hard to get above 1 million.
Will I ever be able to watch The Matrix on Solana? Like, is that in the future?
Not without some really major, like fundamental. It would have to be similar idea, but done totally differently
Yeah.
to
Okay.
build like. Because the hard part with video and this like real time data is this the persistence of like memory, or like the things that are cached and really really fast. That's really really hard to do in a highly replicated environment. It's really really hard to make tons of memory really available at low latency, but also make it really hard to destroy it. In fact, those are kind of opposing things.
Yeah, yeah. Well, first, you're doing great on avoiding jargon. I can
Okay.
see the words are almost coming out of your mouth, and then you're choosing
Yeah.
another one. So I appreciate it. So maybe just talking about, okay, the benefit of it is that it can't be destroyed. It's decentralized. Um, the downside is that it's slow, but it's faster than most of the alternative blockchains. Um, and so, is that benefit? I'm just trying to like weigh that. The benefit of decentralization is so good that it's worth sacrificing on speed, right?
Well, from a regular computer, right? Because you just can't. You need you need decentralization. So what decentralization buys you is this hard to destroy property. And a lot of competitors or early chains like Bitcoin, Ethereum, they've achieved that. It's really really hard to destroy them. Um, but because they're so limited in the number of actions they can do, five or 7 or 11, the cost to use them becomes really really high when demand is high, because you have low supply, low capacity, high demand. All of a sudden people pay more, right, to use one of those five transactions per second. And that makes them still useful because there's people willing to pay for it because they derive a benefit greater than the cost, right? But it makes them impossible for everyone else that just wants to maybe do other applications, right? So
Yeah.
this is where like everything that we're doing is to make this thing really really hard to destroy, but also make it as cheap as possible, because that opens up different applications that people have just not thought of before. Um, but they're
Yeah.
pretty simple and there's really only one application that I that I think we're working on,
Yeah.
and it's marketplaces.
Marketplace.
It's this idea that you and I have something to buy and something to sell, right? And there's a way for us to coordinate in a way that I can post my offer and I can go away and go to sleep, and then you can go look it up and pick it up and take it, and that all of that happens magically on this blockchain. And where the stuff is subtly interesting is like the web, right? Google, everything else, they work on a marketplace called an ad exchange, and that thing takes your data and sells it for like zero point 0.2 cents. Like basically figures out who you are, sends that thing to an exchange, says, hey, Anatoly is on this website for the next, like, we think 50 seconds, right? And who wants to buy his attention? Um, and somebody will bid on that, and then that exchange happens. Uh, but that is the centralized marketplace that's doing it. And a decentralized version of this experience would be that I am on a website and I click a like button, or I send an NFT, a picture of a cat that I like, to somebody
Yeah.
to trade him for a picture of a dog. And the platform is just a marketplace that's trading between peer to peer without selling anybody's data, because now it's a peer to peer relationship. Nobody wants to steal anybody's data. They want to create an environment where people want to create and share content and be happy. They don't need to take your information and shove you ads you don't want.
Uh-huh.
So by building this marketplace that's really, really, really cheap enough to compete with Google, it means that it's possible to build a web experience that doesn't involve Google or Facebook. So in the same way that like in the 90s when I was building Linux to run on those computers, there was this kind of idea of a Microsoft tax-free personal computer. You didn't
Yeah.
have to pay Microsoft to have a personal computer. You could actually build the whole thing yourself with your own software that was open. That was a really powerful idea that ended up succeeding in a really weird way, right? Like Ubuntu, Google, and like every Linux dev builds on Linux, and Microsoft Azure now runs Linux servers.
Yeah. So that's a really powerful idea. So using a blockchain, using Solana allows you to engage in a marketplace without people taking your data and selling you ads based on it, without Facebook sort of stealing your data. But what is the revenue? Who's supporting it then? What is the revenue
so,
or the
so
support that goes into it?
the platform that you're on, right? Your website is now a marketplace. It's just taking a percentage of every trade, of every exchange of you know the token that represents likes, right, or whatever. So it's really kind of open ended, and as long as those things have value, because somebody's willing to buy them to participate in that network, you can then monetize without needing to steal anyone's data, and that's a really really different way to build the web, right?
Yeah. What about just turning on an ad blocker? Does that not is that not sufficient?
Well, how do the people that are building this stuff, how do they make money? How do they like survive, right? Like how do they like, there's no free lunch. Somebody's got to do
That's
it.
true. That's totally fair. That's totally fair. So that's a powerful idea. So, and maybe we can talk a little bit about. So first, kind of at the high level, what it really is a marketplace. That's sort of the activity. That's the
It's
transactions
a
that.
programmable open to kind of like API to build whatever crazy marketplace you want, whether it's trading, like borrow lending tokens and DeFi, or pictures of monkeys.
Those are popular these days, I hear.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So marketplaces, and what is unique about the Solana marketplace? Maybe
So
like both the technology and the
yeah.
applications.
So because we built this thing from the ground up using a lot of the experiences that we had from Qualcomm, it really the software is designed to get out of the way of the hardware the best it can. And this is really like our core thesis is that Moore's law is going to double again next in the next 2 years. It means twice as many cores, twice as much memory bandwidth, twice as much network. How do we make sure that when that happens, that the network gets faster? And that is unique to Solana. All other networks don't have that property. They're trying to scale in different ways, but this is something that we really focused on from day one. And what that means is that the kinds of markets you can build on this are much closer to what you see on NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange. But where they're applied is totally different. It's not like, the slide deck at the Seeds for Seed Solano said blockchain and NASDAQ speed. And then I initially was like, in those early days as like a green founder, I was thinking we're gonna really destroy NASDAQ. All the stuff that equities is gonna move over to blockchain. But as obviously seen the growth in crypto and just the whole ecosystem in general, it's more obvious to me that it's just gonna outpace it. Like, this is gonna be a new way to do web. It's gonna be a new way to monetize a whole lot of experiences in gaming, and all these things are going to grow much much bigger than this old TradeFi stuff, and eventually like kind of replace some of the same functionality. You might see companies then issue directly a token instead of stock, but still same kind of like property rights or stock rights, just for a smart contract, simply because these interfaces and the tooling is all open source, all open platforms. It's programmable. It is better user experiences, and there's no intermediaries that take a slice, right? It has to be cheap enough for people to send pictures of monkeys to each other.
Well, sometimes those pictures are pretty expensive, so Um, yeah. So okay, there's no intermediaries. It's open source. Does that mean any coder can come in and improve it and build upon it, so long
Yeah,
as they
or fork it.
agrees with the improvements?
Yeah, they can do that, or they can literally fork it and try to build their own network.
Yeah. Just take all the
It,
technology and try to build a new
yeah,
sort of layer on
right.
layer that people follow instead. A new fork, obviously, the
Yep.
word fork is there. Um, okay, that's really cool. And then maybe as far as how Solana is able to be faster than the other chains. I know there's the whole proof of history, and that's a pretty technical topic. Is there a way to
Yeah.
explain it at a high
Okay,
level?
so the VDF part was that like,
What's
I
VDF?
was the verifiable delay function was that like the thing that I couldn't Google. It's actually like a lot of really smart folks at Stanford have been working on these things for a long time, and it is a puzzle like the proof of work puzzle that is a way to prove that somebody else has spent some time doing something.
Okay.
Um, and what the way that we figured out how to use these things inside a blockchain was that you can build a similar structure to how radio towers coordinate inside cellular networks. And if you remember your radio or like physics classes, electromagnetic waves, radio waves, they interfere. So when two radio towers transmit at the same time over the same frequency, that interference creates noise and information cannot pass, right?
I believe
So
you. We'll take your word for it.
all right. Right, two waves are mixing, it gets
It sounds
mushy, you
messy.
can't surf two waves.
It sounds messy. Yeah, I could. It's choppy. It's choppy.
Yeah, it's choppy, exactly.
Yeah.
So the way that they do this in radio is every tower has a clock and you alternate by time. So one person goes and the next person goes, and therefore it's not choppy. There's no interference. And in blockchains, when two block producers, two nodes on this open network that's trying to make as many copies of itself as possible, when two of these copy creators decide that they're supposed to make the next change, right? The next version or the next state transition or kind of the next block. If two of them decide to do it at the same time, the network doesn't know which one is right. It doesn't know which copy is the correct one. And that's a noisy state. So if you could alternate them by time, then this everything would go really, really fast. But the hard problem is that you can't use a centralized clock because that would be a thing that somebody could destroy and then stop the network.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. It's quite a
Right.
failure.
Right, exactly. So that would be a point of failure. So what we do is we use this VDF, right, and like
PDF,
the
verifiable
verifiable
delay
delay
function.
function
There we
that
go.
we later called proof of history. As a everything needs a proof of something, right? At that time, proofs of something were really popular.
Yeah. Definitely in.
So that was it. Yeah,
That's
and
amazing.
that took a lot of like iteration. It wasn't obvious that was a way to use these things, and a lot of people in the industry actually use verifiable delay functions for different purpose. The most similar one is to prove that you're holding on to some amount of data for some amount of time, and like Chia Network and Filecoin do that. And another one is for to generate random numbers. If you and I agree that you're going to start with some unknown input or some input that we agree on, and then whatever that random permutation in 10 minutes of this VDF lands on is the real number random number we're gonna use to decide some game, then we can agree on that, and then 10 minutes later we know the result. So that's another use of it.
Very cool. Very cool. Maybe now pulling up from the technical bit, looking towards the future, what will it take? What are the biggest challenges for a technology like Solana to reach mass adoption for people outside of the inner workings of crypto to start using it to exchange things?
So I would first like let's define what mass adoption is. And like I remember in the 90s internet, a lot of people bought pets.com stock
Yeah.
but didn't use pets.com, right?
Yeah, that's fair. That totally
because
is
it
fair.
didn't work. But for just nobody understood what the web was or how to use it.
Yep.
And I feel like there's some of that going on in crypto. So what is really important in terms of adoption is, did you install a wallet that can sign things? Did you custody your seed? Are you the custodian of this key that can then interact with this computer? So that cryptographic interaction and self custody, that's usage. Everything else is like, I think people just being huge fans of the space,
Yeah.
like
Going to a
enthusiastic.
Solana party doesn't count as being a Solana user.
Right, exactly. It's being very enthusiastic, but that's not actually using the network. And there's maybe 10 million people in the world of all the networks combined that actually sign things. Um, so it's a pretty small number, and it's really important for that number to get to like 100 million, then 500 million, then a billion. And just like it was for the internet, right? You had 10 million people browsing the internet. That was the addressable market cap market for pets.com, or all the applications building on the internet. That was like the best you can do is get to all of those. And that's a too small of a number to really like make a dent in the world.
Yeah.
Um,
So you're saying someone that has Solana on Coinbase or Gemini or whatever, they're not really using it. It's when they have their own wallet that they're exchanging things with and interacting with in their own way, where they custody the assets
use
themselves.
When they use those applications, they get some of the monkeys.
Yeah. I got a tiger with a balloon.
Okay,
Yeah.
so participating right in that drop for that piece of art,
Yeah.
and then jumping into Discord and seeing the artists in that community, you are participating in a social network that is monetized on a blockchain without
That's
the use of advertisement.
without the use of advertisement. You really don't like those advertisers, do you?
I think it's not that I don't. I think they're honestly, it's like it's fine. Like I don't think it's a big deal
Uh-huh.
from like a. I think it's interesting that if you can build that, it's not that I'm expecting like the Linux to destroy Microsoft, right? I've
Yeah.
like learned enough to where I know that if you can actually build an equivalent experience, you may not be able to destroy, who you're actually competing with, but that there's now an opportunity for a new generation to innovate and do something totally unexpected. And that's what we saw with Linux, with the open source movement. Um, I think we're going to see the same thing with cryptocurrencies, and we'll probably never displace Google or Facebook, but you may start seeing networks and applications in like gaming and social and governance that just really surprise people.
Yeah, that's cool. Gaming, social governance, three big topics to focus on. Um, Maybe two last questions. Definitely want to respect your time. Second to last is, what are you most excited about for Solana and maybe the broader crypto ecosystem for the coming year?
I'm excited for the people that are starting to self custody and like use these networks. It's a really really powerful thing. Like it's almost, the layer ones or like the blockchains are not nowhere near as important as people having access to cryptography and using it. And that's what really creates this like, kind of magical experience. And you know the only parallels that I remember are like the internet, when people just started to learn how to browse. It took a mental shift to understand what a link is, right? That there's a link, there's a URL bar. When you click on another link, it goes to a different thing, right? And like build that physical mental model that there's servers that are almost like occupying different geographies and space,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, no, I definitely know the feeling, and I think, I mean, for me personally, when I first installed my Phantom wallet and seen a transaction go through, and seeing how quick it is, I mean, it is definitely exciting. And then you can, I don't know all the words what they mean on the chain, but you can look at it and it says success, and that's all I care about. So that's awesome. And then maybe for someone that wants to learn more about Solana, coming from the outside, what are some good resources you recommend for someone non-technically inclined to get started?
Oh man, non-technically inclined. We're so engineering like and like developer focused. Try our website. There's some documentation. There's some like kind of articles and documentation, but probably the podcast. Like we have our own podcast where you can hear some of the founders that are building on Solana kind of tell their story, and that might kind of give you an idea what kinds of applications people are building and what they're thinking. Like right now, what are these founders that are gonna, spend the next 4 years grinding to be successful? Why are they doing this, and what are they building? It's
Yeah.
worthwhile. It's worthwhile to listen to them.
Cool. Cool. Well, yeah, I'll see if I can link some things into this post. And this was really educational for me. I really appreciated the level of insight, the avoidance of jargon. I think the first 2 minutes you used a lot of words I didn't understand, but after that we got into language
Nice.
I could
Okay.
comprehend. So definitely appreciate it, and thank you for making the time. Really
For
appreciate it.
sure. For sure. All
Cool.
right.
Well, see you, Anatoly. Thanks
Take
again.
care.